Crosby, Cleland, my name, farming in Saintfield. Stock, we're talking about between 800 and 900 ewes lambing each year. Cleland breed, working with Aberfield and Highlander crosses, bringing up through the maternal side, and Primera, New Zealand, Suffolk, terminal sires, main ones. We are stocking quite heavy now. It's 16 ewes to the hectare, but then they're lighter weight ewes, so that's the reason we can go up to that. The grazing side, we're working in paddocks, rotational grazing, and 3 years ago we established the first of the herbal swards. And we had enough of the herbal swards to keep 100 ewes plus their lambs on one side. On the other run, similar number of ewes, etc. We're working with grass clover and the sward, and as it turned out, this wasn't as good a year in live weight gains as other years, but we're sitting with, it was actually 280 on the grass with the clover, and the herbal sward was actually 285. Not a big difference, but yes, there was a slight difference. The only thing I would say now, that was all done over the first 7 weeks. Since then, a lot more drought coming in, and the swards with the herbs in it are lasting longer, and I haven't got a comparison of that part yet, but certainly this field we're in now has had about 8 or 9 weeks with very little rain. As you can see in it, it's the herbs that are showing through, the grass isn't making much of an effort. The plate meter is showing less on a little bit less each time on the herbal sward, but the animals are staying on the herbal sward longer, which shows me the bigger leaf is lasting longer. You know, and it's showing that live weight gain we talked about earlier on. Good growth. I think at the minute we're sitting about 7 tonnes at this stage in the year. Where are we now? The end of July, and there'll be more to the end. We have done over 12, but I remember the worst drought year we actually dropped down to 6 tonnes, and that made a big difference. The weather is a big runner of what our production of grass is going to be. We're only using about 3/4 of a bag of fertiliser at the beginning of the year, otherwise we don't use any fertiliser over the rest of the farm. Only using the organic slurry and manure that we have produced from the farm over the winter. Compared to other farms, we're sheep only, so I don't want strong grass. The ryegrass is nearly too strong for our sward, so I like to get the sheep in about the 3,000 mark and raise it down to, well, depends on the time of the year, but 1,500 earlier in the year and down to 17, 18 or 1,900 later. The one thing that we do, we actually graze tighter than others seem to, and it is the chicory. With 3 years in this particular paddock here, chicory is still there, but I would say we're down to about 30% of the chicory. Plantain is no problem, it's there. Clover is great, covered in the clover. The grass at the minute, after the last 6 weeks of just sporadic showers, no real count of rain at all. The grass isn't coming, but the leaf is there for the next grazing in the sheep, so that's the important part. We've been, over the last 10-20 years, we've sprayed the weeds out, and then we would work on spot spraying. So we've managed to keep the weeds down. The only problem we'd have would be nettles, and the sheep seem to be picking up the nettle seed from the boundary and bringing it into the pasture, so we're still doing a bit of spot spraying, but weeds wouldn't be a big problem though. The other bit I would add too is the fact that we don't plough and keeping the good on top of the ground. And with the light of the sheep, you know, aeration isn't really a problem. We use the spiked roller across the ground. But the fact that we don't plough isn't bringing up the weeds again, and that's maybe another reason why we can keep a good clean sward. The herbs have been an addition to what we're doing. We have been rotating, our grazing has always been rotational, and the herbs have been an addition that we've been able to use, and it's getting us through the summer. That's the main part. We're sort of getting 2 dry spells over the summer, and that's where the herbs have helped. Not a big difference overall really, except that they are good in the summer. I've actually got to the stage now we're not even spraying off. The grazing is quite important, but we're stitching in, and I've actually cut the chicory out because we've done that a few years and the chicory doesn't like the stitching in, but the plantain and the clover are the main part that I'm finding the beneficial part to the sheep. So that's what I'm pushing on with a few other. Adding red clover into a few swards as well now. It's very hard to give advice because every farm's different and you really have to look at pH is the first thing. There's no point in starting into it. Most of my pHs were sitting about that 6.2 to 6.5. Anything near the 6.5 is definitely doing better. So I'm bringing another ton of lime into the ground at the minute and bringing the pHs up to give it a better chance. But that would be the first advice. Make sure the soil is right before you try anything.